told you there's a synthesizer that has just about every sound you could ever wish for. The analog warmth of Rolands, Moogs, sequentials, the digital sparkle of Yamahas and lo-fi samplers, modern synthesis from 2025, plus pianos, vintage electric pianos, orchestral strings, brass, woodwinds, choirs. You'll probably say, surely there's a big catch here. And yes, there is a catch. We'll talk about that in a second. But after 6 weeks with the AstroLab 37, I think I found the closest thing yet to an Everything Synth. So let's unpack what this thing really is and what it isn't. Quick disclaimer, Arturia sent this over for me to test. They don't get to see this video before you do. And as always, my opinions are my own. So what exactly is the AstroLab 37? In a nutshell, AstroLab is a hardware version of Arturia's Analog Lab software, which in turn is a synth engine shell for around 40 different instruments. This particular AstroLab is a more compact version compared to its siblings. It has 37 keys. It's designed for performers and studio producers and comes with over 1,800 sound presets. You're basically getting a hardware gateway into Arturia's sound universe, which includes modern synths like Pigments and MiniFreak, but also faithful replicas of hardware classics like Jupiter, Juno, MS-20, ARP 2600, Prophet 5. Honestly, the list just goes on and on. The hardware is very similar to the MiniFreak. It has the same keybed, a similar sturdy plastic build, but with a few nice touches. Like the pitch bend and mod wheels are full metal, and the power button might just be the nicest one I've ever seen. The main buttons are organized around sound categories. There's no onboard sequencer or MIDI looper, so the play and record buttons from the larger AstroLabs are gone. You have 4 encoders on this side for quick access to the 4 macros that each preset has, and then another 4 encoders on the other side for effects, which mirrors how it looks like in Analog Lab. And Analog Lab Pro is included with the AstroLab. All right, let's hear what this thing actually sounds like. This is the kind of sound that just invites you to play slower and let it evolve. And that's the story with a lot of patches here. Even though it's preset driven, you can still shape them expressively using the macros. Some of these more traditional sounds surprise me. I stumble on this organ preset, and just by tweaking a few of the macros, it can turn into a very lush ambient texture instead. And that's kind of the theme with the AstroLab. It can sound realistic in one moment and completely otherworldly in the next. In addition to browsing presets by category, you can also browse by instrument, and in some cases even by artists. They've added a bunch of faithful recreations of classic synth patches from well-known artists. The only thing that irritates me a bit is that I can't find any Swedish artists in here, yet somehow Norway ended up in this list. By the way, if you're enjoying these sound demos or finding this video helpful so far, a quick like really helps the channel reach more people, so thanks for that. I also tried running the AstroLab through the Digitakt 2 for sampling and sequencing, and it works beautifully as a sound source in a hybrid setup. So this gives you a taste of what it can do. It's built around presets that you can tweak, and it's really hard not to find something inspiring in here. I said there's a catch, right? So let's jump over to the software side of things and see how it all connects. Here's where things get a little bit technical, but it's important to understand what's really going on inside of the AstroLab. Again, the AstroLab is a hardware version of Analog Lab Pro, which is included, AstroLab itself isn't really a synth. It's more of a wrapper that combines sounds from Arturia's different virtual instruments. Under the hood of every preset, there's an instrument running. Each AstroLab preset is built from one or two of those instruments, stacked or split, and then wrapped into 4 effects: 2 insert effects, delay, and reverb. You can edit all of those effects from the hardware itself or from the software. Just by holding down this button, you can change that effect to some of the built-in effects. And you can also change the settings for each effect. So for example, if you wanted to change the delay to be a ping pong delay, you can just easily do that here. So that's all accessible. What you can't edit from the AstroLab is the actual V collection patch underneath, unless you own the license for that corresponding instrument. So for example, if this preset uses a Mini-V bass and you own the Mini-V plugin, you can open it right here in AstroLab. And you can tweak the oscillators, the filters, the envelopes, whatever you like, and then save it back onto the AstroLab or AstroLab software. But if you don't own that plugin, you'll still hear the sound from the preset, but you can't change its internals. There's also a little bonus quirk. Sometimes the underlying synth patch already includes delay and reverb, and then the analog preset wrapper itself optionally adds another layer of delay and reverb on top of that, which I guess is how you end up making ambient music by accident. So to summarize, you can edit the effects, but to go deeper, to actually reshape those underlying synths and reprogram the macros, you'll need a corresponding V collection license and a computer. And that's where the value equation gets interesting. I'll talk about overall value in just a moment, but first, let's talk about who the AstroLab is really for. I like to think of synth players on a kind of spectrum, mainly in how hands-on they like to be with sound design. On one side, you got the sound designers, the people who enjoy diving deep into the mod matrix, all that kind of good stuff. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the players, the people who just want to pick a patch and just play, where the focus really is on making music. And then I think most of us are somewhere in the middle. We pretend that we're in control, and we tweak, we explore, we have fun, but we don't necessarily want to reinvent synthesis every time we make a new track. And I'm curious where you see yourself in this spectrum. If you're more of a sound designer or more of a performance player, let me know in the comments. I think somewhere in the middle is where the MiniFreak lives, which is a synthesizer that has macros for the different synth engines, and it's really inviting you to explore, but it still gives you enough of deep sound design when you want. And I would say the AstroLab 37 leans more towards the player side of things. But it's definitely not just a collection of presets. Those 4 macros can shape each sound in really meaningful ways, and then you have effects on top of that which you can replace. And you can strip a patch down to something dry and raw and completely redress it with your own effects via hardware or the DAW. For the most part, the presets are really well thought out. There are some exceptions, and I'll talk about that shortly. Personally, I don't think of the AstroLab as a preset machine. It's really more of a massive sound playground. It's for musicians who value breadth over depth. People who want inspiring sounds at their fingertips, but still appreciate a bit of control. And that brings us back to the value equation I mentioned earlier, because what if you do want more control? This is where things get interesting, and there are some options worth exploring. Let's talk about the overall value. I mentioned earlier that AstroLab is basically a wrapper around those V collection instruments. It's kind of a gateway drug into that whole Arturia ecosystem. And it's a clever move from them, because you'll fall in love with these sounds, and before you know it, you'll want the full versions and dig deep. But honestly, it's not a bad deal. If you buy the V collection intro bundle, which is around 200 euros or US dollars, you get full access to some of these instruments, which means that you have full access to do sound editing on those instruments. Those instruments include the MiniFreak, the Juno, Prophet, Minimoog, and a few others. One of my favorites is Augmented Strings. So that means that you can open the exact same synth engine that lives under the hood of the AstroLab and then edit them freely on your computer, and even save those tweaks back into hardware. One question I think some people will ask, because they're in the same price and size categories, is should I get the AstroLab 37 or the MiniFreak? I'll leave a link to my MiniFreak review down in the description. If you're purchasing one of these synthesizers, you can use my affiliate links, and that's a nice way to support my work. MiniFreak hardware is around 600, and in that price you also get the MiniFreak V instrument. So you get that beautiful one-to-one hardware control surface, and you get the plugin so you can do sound design both on hardware and on the computer. AstroLab 37 is around the same price, about 700. You're effectively getting AstroLab Pro with 1800 sounds from 40 different instruments. So the choice really depends on whether you value a broad range of sounds more than deep sound design. If you're the kind of person who loves that tactile, physical interaction when doing sound design, the MiniFreak is going to be the more satisfying choice. But if you're the kind of musician that sometimes you need a Moog, other times you need a Roland, and other times you need a piano, then the AstroLab 37 is the better choice. Personally, I think of the AstroLab less of a synthesizer and more of a massive sound playground. It's something that I can reach for when I need inspiration. It's not trying to replace the hands-on experience of a MiniFreak. It's giving me everything else. So after 6 weeks with the AstroLab 37, here's what stands out. Starting with the pros. The sound quality is consistently excellent. Arturia clearly knows what they're doing in the sound department. That library of 1800 sounds is massive. Whatever style I'm in, cinematic, trance, synthwave, there's always something usable. The macro and effect setup gives just enough control to shape a preset so it fits in a mix or in a live set. And it's easy enough to just turn off the effects and run a sound through other hardware or plugins. Build quality is really solid for the price, great keybed, metal wheels, and yeah, really sturdy encoder knobs. They feel great. And it's so small. I mean, this fits anywhere. Finally, the hybrid workflow. The way it syncs with AstroLab is so smooth. It feels like one ecosystem, not two separate worlds. This is pretty much exactly the same hardware-software integration that I talked so much about in my MiniFreak review, and it makes a massive difference for a producer. On the con side, well, the first is obviously that big catch that I talked about. Even though you can tweak a lot, it's still fundamentally preset-driven, and any deep sound design requires software. There's no sequencer or looper. Sometimes I stumble over a sound that I like, and I start to play. And I would really like to just be able to capture that in the moment. This functionality actually exists in the bigger AstroLab siblings, so Arturia decided to remove it from this firmware. Perhaps we can convince them to add it back in. I wish this was powered by USB-C. It has a USB-C port for communication with the plugin, but it doesn't power it. It would be nice if the favorites and custom presets appear under each sound category. So like, for example, if I press on piano, I want to see my presets first. And finally, some presets just don't make a lot of sense without the corresponding V collection software. You have an instrument called Acid, which is a 303. This V collection instrument has its own sequencer. So without the V collection license, you can't modify the sequence. So it's basically playing back a pre-programmed bass line. And, that's not really what I want when I make music. I want to make it my own music. Now, one thing you can do, of course, is to sample that preset and then chop it up and turn it into whatever you want. So, is this the Everything Synth? Maybe not literally, and I'm not about to sell my other synths. But I'll tell you this much. I've never made more music than I have in these 6 weeks with the AstroLab. It's almost impossible not to get inspired when you start playing some of these sounds. And I really look forward to sharing more of the music on this channel soon. So if you ever feel like taking a break from all the sound designing and writing an LFO to modulate the speed of another LFO, this might just be the perfect creative escape. Let's wrap this up. For me, the AstroLab 37 is going to continue to be what it's been for the past 6 weeks, a sound source and an idea machine. It's perfect when I'm writing and I want to reach for a pad, piano, or some texture quickly without losing focus. I really enjoy keeping it connected to my Digitakt too, so I can quickly grab a phrase or sound and then continue the creative process there. And when I want to produce music in the DAW, the AstroLab is an instant inspiration keyboard that I can plug in and start making music with, just like the MiniFreak, but creating deeper sound design for a more broad sound palette. It's not a deep synth, but it's an incredibly inspiring one. And it's quite possibly the broadest range of sounds available in a single instrument at this price point. So now I'm really curious about what you think. Would you rather have a hands-on synth like the MiniFreak or a massive sound library like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll reply to as many as I can. And if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please hit like and subscribe and maybe share it with someone you know who is interested in the AstroLab. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the music, and I'll see you in the next one.